record. All right, hello
Looking
and
good.
welcome to the interview. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Juan Bagnell. I post a bunch of tech and consumer electronics reviews as some gadget guy, and I work with a number of other outlets like Slick Deals and reviews.org and some other outlets just to provide tech commentary and editorial.
Oh, nice. I've read some of those websites before, reviews.org in particular.
Yeah, I get
Um,
around.
Sorry, that's my light.
No worries.
Right, there we go. All right, let me pull up my question so we can
Yeah,
start.
looking forward to it.
So, just a little bit of background about me and regarding your channel. I found your channel a couple of months ago and have been watching ever since.
Oh, well, I'm glad you've been enjoying the content. I have a very particular flavor of old man cranky tech analysis. So,
Mhm.
always happy to meet a few other people that are checking it out.
All right. Um, Still recording? Yeah, okay. So I checked in and I've seen that you wrote a book about camera photography, smartphone photography, and
Hmm.
you actually updated it in 2020.
Yes.
What gave you the inspiration to write a book and how long did it take you?
Well, it took me the inspiration was never to write the book. I started out trying to do just a very simple article talking about depth of field.
Mm,
Trying to describe what camera blur can look like on smartphones at the time, and I believe I'd started writing this article back in like 2017. And so it's kind of snowballed on me where writing out the explanation of this one photography concept meant I had to kind of touch on another photography concept.
mm,
I had to explain why phones were different and how apertures functioned. And so one article turned into three articles turned into a series of video scripts. And then I'd realize like I've written 10,000 words on this subject. Really, the only thing that made sense was to kind of staple it all together and turn it into a book. And the revision, and I appreciate you bringing up the book. There is a revision planned for early 2023 because over those
nice.
2 years from 2020 to through 2022, we've seen some very impressive improvements to smartphone photography. And that's
Mm,
what's kind of fun is over a very short period of time, we've seen camera optics get much better, and
mhm.
it's a different part of the story to tell from when I started writing the book like 5 years ago.
So, when you talk about the blue, background blue, modern smartphones now can have like a portrait mode in them. So, do you
Mhm.
talk about that in the book, or you just talk about doing it with just the hardware alone?
Well, I describe it. The book is definitely a starter on just basics of photography concepts. But you can learn a lot by picking up a DSLR and then trying to figure out similar stuff on your
Hmm.
phone. There's not a lot that goes in the opposite direction. I feel most people start their content creation journey picking up a phone.
Hmm.
So I wanted to make something that started the conversation there. There is some discussion on things like portrait modes and cinema modes. I forget what Huawei used to call theirs was like a digital bokeh effect or
Hmm.
something like that. Um, I think those tools can be fun, but then I think if a number of people understand some of the functional differences between different camera sensors and apertures, some of the hardware that really gets put into these things, I think you can more consistently arrive at a higher quality product when you understand light just a little bit better. So more of the technique and more of the sort of photography education conversation is a little bit more focused on what is the sort of practical output, what is the lens and the sensor, what do they really contribute, and then from there, if someone wants to use one of these digital effects, I think they'll be better prepared for it.
Nice. So it seems like you really have an interest in photography. What started that?
I've been shooting since I was a kid. I think it probably skips a generation. My grandfather was an absolute monster of a photographer with old slide cameras and with a little 8 millimeter film camera. And so I've got this wealth of family history that he was able to kind of document. It's not very many people my age who get to say things like, I can see a home movie of my grandparents in their 20s dancing a jitterbug. It's not just some static photo where they posed really nicely and they're dressed really nice and they have this frozen expression. Like, I can see them eating and drinking and going to Disneyland and doing all these things. And since I was a little kid, I had a 110 film camera in high school. I shot a ton of 35 millimeter film. As the digital revolution started, I jumped on that bandwagon pretty early with DSLRs. And now today, I'm trying to kind of share some of that with my daughter. Like, she doesn't really understand a world of phones as consumption devices. I hand her a phone, and the first thing she turns to is one of the cameras. I've got an old busted micro four thirds shooter. That's what she's growing up with. Like, she's already learning about composition and using different lenses and things like that. So it's really just, it's been a part of my DNA since my earliest memories.
Nice. So in your videos, you address competition a lot. Like probably like
Yeah.
once every two videos. Um, and in your videos, you always talk about why it's so important. So my question is,
Mhm.
what devices would you like to see compete in the US?
Oh man, all of them. Right now, I fear here in the United States, here in North America, we're in really dangerous territory. There's been so little interest in just sort of the consumer landscape or the consumer market for some of these other brands that I fear more companies might follow LG's lead and start pulling out, especially in the medium to high tier. It's pretty easy walking into the United States with another $300 phone that's going to go to one of the lower cost carriers.
Mm-hmm.
You can sell it on an MVNO. Those are
Hmm.
pretty easy. I mean, we'll see continued success on Nords, and
Hmm.
Motos and
Yeah.
things like that. That's cake. TCL has been putting out some great stuff in that range. But for those of us that really value the phone as a pocket computer, not just as
Hmm.
a phone that does phone things, but as something that can legitimately start replacing other electronics like laptops, tablets, and cameras, we're increasingly falling behind the curve. The work that's being done by the BBK brands. I've got an Honor over here. I've got one of the higher tier Motorola's. I've got numerous Vivos, the Xiaomi 12S Ultra. All of those are a solid generation ahead of the hardware that we get here in the USA, and it's definitely kind of putting a hurt on that conversation. So I mean, I'd want to see all of them. I'd love to see
Um,
what Xiaomi could deliver, really addressing a premium North America market. Vivo has been rocking my socks. Their phones have been great. There's a lot that we could be playing with.
nice. So do any of those phones, those BBK phones, apart from OnePlus phones, have desktop mode like Samsung Dex?
No, that's another reason why I want us to have this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I feel the smartphone desktop mode is a woefully underrepresented piece of technology. I'm not the biggest fan of Samsung, but I have to celebrate how good they've been able to move compute power into a more traditional desktop experience. And it really has set the stage for a number of other players. Like, we wouldn't have Motorola Ready 4 if Dex hadn't existed, and Dex wouldn't be getting better if Motorola Ready 4 hadn't surpassed Dex. And we can't just say, oh, well, there is competition, but everyone should just buy Samsung because they're the most popular. It's as soon as we see Samsung start to worry about some competition, your Galaxy phones get better. So if you're a Samsung fan, the best thing you can hope for is strong players from outside Apple.
Mm-hmm.
Because if Apple is the only thing on Samsung's radar, then their phones don't get better; they get more Apple-y.
Mm-hmm.
So, for a OnePlus or a BBK brand, unfortunately, no. The phones that do support video out, unfortunately, only use the Android alternative output, which is a very bare bones experience. It's
Mm-hmm.
still useful. It's still functional. Like, I have a Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV, and I used it on a recent vacation, plugging it into a portable monitor, and it does a passable job of using one app at a time.
Mm-hmm. I
You
think
can
I saw that video.
Yeah, you can get work done just single app, but it's not a really robust desktop. So as soon as you're done with that one app, you kind of have to close
Close it.
it down, and then you can open up another one app. You can't like toggle back and forth. But from having used Moto Ready 4 heavily over the last year, it's really a precious piece of tech. There are a lot of people out there that have this insanely powerful pocket computer, and they might be struggling. You know, it could be pricing, it could be availability, it could be distribution. And instead, if they just plugged their phone into a TV or into
Hmm.
a monitor from an old desktop or something like that, they would have a fully functional laptop powerful device ready to get their compute work done. And I think people's needs would be easily satisfied. Even by a 2-year-old premium tier phone, this stuff is pretty good. It really gets the job done.
Hmm. Yeah, as a Samsung fan,
Mhm.
I missed the micro SD card slots and
Yeah, there's a lot. I don't think
because
I have it on my desk right now, but I almost always have my S10e within reach because I kind of feel like the S10 era was peak Samsung, and
mhm.
it's all been kind of downhill since there.
Yeah, I actually started petitioning for it on my site. Get it
Oh,
back.
I'll go to that. I'll sign that petition. I
Mhm.
mean, you know, add me to the list because I feel like we keep doing these things that remove functionality from our devices, and they don't really make the device better. They just make the device more expensive, and you get less.
Yeah, for instance, I upgraded my A71 5G to an S22
Hmm.
Plus, and the S22 Plus allows you to shoot in RAW. It has all these nice
Yeah.
functions. I got the 128 gig model, and I'm already at 103 gig.
Oh yeah, you max them out fast. Yeah,
Mhm. And I
that's
just got it like
the
last week.
curse. Oh, I mean, so whenever I try and do a camera review, I'll put 50 or 60 gig of photos on that phone in like a week.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, when I do those camera deep dives, I'm shooting intense amounts of footage just to kind of have comparative video and photo samples that you can kind of look back on other phones that I've shot in similar
Hmm.
places. Yeah, it's really the sad part right now. The only game in town, like say you had a Galaxy S10
Uh-huh.
and you liked having a headphone jack and you liked having a memory card slot,
Hmm.
literally the only game left is Sony.
Yeah.
There's no one left that offers those features. And I just bought a 400 gigabyte card at Costco for 50 bucks.
Nice.
There there is no built-in storage on a phone that's going to triple the amount of storage for 40 bucks or
Hmm.
for 50 bucks. It was $50 for a 400 gigabyte card. You get like $100 and, you know, 128. Or if you wait for a really good sale, you can get 256 for the price of 128. That's not really competition. That's the illusion of competition and features. Instead, we should be empowering consumers to upgrade without having
Hmm.
to buy a whole other phone.
So I got this question from an interview I heard, and I'm modifying
Oh,
it a little bit. Um,
sure.
would you rather use a Windows phone for the next 5 years or lose 100,000 subscribers?
um, See, the thing is, I really like Windows Phone.
Hmm.
Um, would I rather use a Windows Phone for the next 5 years
You can't
and I get
change
to
unless you
keep
get
it on
like a
my own?
test device. Then you test and send it back or whatever.
Oh no, no, I mean now you're giving me an out. So as long as I'm testing and reviewing, then absolutely I would take the Windows Phone and keep all my subscribers. So unfortunately, just because of the state of like the sort of hobbyist community and what's going on with Windows phones, and they're still functional. I mean that's what's
Hmm.
crazy is I can pull out my 1520 or my 1020, and it's
Hmm.
still a surprisingly functional device, but it would be too difficult. I'd probably drop the Windows Phone. So that's a bummer. But if I can use review devices, I don't think I'd be bothered at all
But you can only
keeping
use
the
them for
Windows
the
Phone.
like review period. You can't keep them. You have to
No,
flip them. Oh,
again,
okay.
that I feel like that would be enough just to kind of like satisfy. I get a little taste over
Got it.
here, get a little taste over there. The Lumia cameras are only
Hmm.
just now being surpassed by the bulk of mainstream Android devices. Um, I mean, I could probably pick up a Lumia 930 and still have it go toe to toe with like an iPhone 14, you know?
Nice.
So, yeah, I mean, if I could do review devices, I could stick with a Windows Phone. We could make that happen.
As long as it has 4G connectivity. Someone gave me
Yeah.
the Nokia 3310 3G from
Oh, yeah.
2017, and I did a review on it, and I put my SIM in it. It didn't work. So.
Yeah. I mean, that transition was pretty rough, but I think, you know, the 930, we could hang with some LTE,
Hmm.
especially in this neighborhood. I have good 5G, but it's
Hmm.
not like it's a total deal breaker having to slide back. I mean, on my Vivos, I have to slide back to LTE because they don't
Hmm.
have great 5G support for the United
Hmm.
States. And on LTE, they're still phenomenal devices.
So you seem to express that you liked Windows Phone. What do you
I
like about it?
love the
Because in
Windows
some of your
Phone.
older videos, I saw you doing the some of the Windows phones versus some of Samsung's flagships. What did you like
Yeah.
about it?
So, first of all, competition.
Hmm.
The operating system landscape is more interesting and diverse, and developers had better support and more options for where they wanted to make and distribute things. I look at sort of WebOS
Hmm.
from Palm
Hmm.
and Windows Phone, and we've got to credit them with a lot of the inspiration, and BlackBerry OS, and
Ah,
BlackBerry OS
yes.
deserves those.
Swipe
So those
gestures.
three
Swipe
swipes,
gestures.
exactly. So everything that we're trying to staple into iOS and
Hmm.
Android now, I believe better versions existed on each of those three platforms for gestures, for organization.
Hmm.
Windows Phone at the time was a brilliant halfway point between the customization of Android and the more rigid structure of
Security.
iOS. And well,
Yeah.
and that helps. So when you sort of limit, you know, what hardware manufacturers can do to put together a Windows Phone and how that software interacts with a select sort of custom number of builds that you can accomplish. Windows Phone was brilliant. The live tile situation
Hmm.
really was way ahead of its time. The app situation was pretty brutal, especially for how Google sort of chilled support for Google
Hmm.
services on Windows phones. But then we look at things like, you know, Snapchat. You know, Snapchat tried to chill out Windows Phone, and now they're kind of desperate, so they're making a much better Windows 10, or excuse me, Windows 11 app for Snapchat back now. And you're like, you know, if you
You
just
can
supported the
Snapchat
platform,
on a computer.
well, that's what we're trying to get around. You know, when a social media network is having difficulty kind of rising above, like, you know, sort of the TikTok noise that's out there, Snap sort of needs to do something. And so now, like, it's Loki, you know, sort of, you must be truly desperate to come to us Windows users, but I guess now Snap is going to support Windows. Cool. But you could have done
Hmm.
that before, and you could have done that with the phones that had the absolute best cameras of their day,
Hmm.
but you decided you just wanted to be an iOS thing, and now look at you now.
So how does Snapchat work? You just
I,
click.
I'm not really super
I
into
kind
Snap
of
because
understand.
so snapping, it's very much of a sort of, I'm having this momentary experience and I'm sharing this little piece of
Hmm.
information, and it's supposed to be a bit more disposable, and then I can go through other people's feeds and
Hmm.
timelines with this kind of disposable content.
Hmm.
But I never got super into Snap because Snap was one of those, kind of like Instagram too, where they only wanted iPhone users.
Okay.
And we do this time and time and time again. It is harder to make a good version of your service that supports the broad mass of Android devices. It was difficult to also work within the constraints of Microsoft's app development programs to
Hmm.
also make a good service. I'm not trying to minimize the developer challenge, but now that you've not fulfilled that challenge, you're surprised that Android users don't want to use Snapchat. It's like, your app has been garbage on our platform. You've not supported us. Why would
Hmm.
we want to engage with a poorer representation or a poorer version of your service? And so now I think a lot of companies are starting to try and embrace some of this split. I mean, we saw the same thing. I love to see Lumafusion on Android,
Hmm.
but they only really made that play when DaVinci Resolve said they were going to support the iPad. You're like, a lot
Hmm.
of iPad OS users are now going to flock over to DaVinci Resolve. That's going to take a chunk out of the Lumafusion fan base. Well, now they're more serious about supporting Android. And it's like, instead, you could have been there all along, and
Hmm.
you could have been, sort of entrenched in the Android community, and you wouldn't be having to sort of panic develop for an entirely new platform of users.
Nice. Like I've seen about Snapchat, kind of how it works, but I never used any of them, so I was just gonna.
I never got in deep. I have an account on Snapchat just to lock up my username. That's really all it's there for.
And also that goes back to the competition thing that you talk about a lot. How apps like Lumafusion, were getting competing with DaVinci Resolve, so now they have to go
Yeah,
back up to Android. And I
but
also downloaded
again,
the app.
that's always it's always a consumer benefit when you've got pressure applied to
Hmm.
these companies and they can't just sit back because there are two really good traditional video editing apps on Android. There's KineMaster and there's Power Director.
Hmm.
But both of those apps have recently switched to very frustrating subscription services for the core editing features.
Hmm.
And you're like, now that LumaFusion's on Android, I have a legitimate alternative to offer
Hmm.
people who might want to do a little higher level video editing, and that's going to have to change the business models at Power Director and KineMaster. At the low
Hmm.
end, CapCut and TikTok are eating them for lunch. At the high end, LumaFusion is a much better, robust, and feature complete video editing solution that you pay for once and you never have to spend another dime. So that's why we never want there to be one distinct winner that sucks all the air out of a conversation because then our products go to crap.
I use KineMaster to edit one of the videos, stop motion on YouTube, and then I switched over and bought LumaFusion on the discounted price for my phone, and
Ah,
I've been making some videos with it.
it's good, right?
Pretty decent, yeah. It crashed a bit, but then I got it back working.
hmm Well, I mean, that's also like within reason.
Hmm.
LumaFusion is a very
Brand
public
new.
beta.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even a full version release yet. So I'm tempering that with some of the recommendations saying like you're on the bleeding edge. This
Hmm.
is brand spanking new. But from my experiences using Power Director recently, the sort of stickiness in LumaFusion hasn't really been much different than some of the higher level crashing that I've had on Power Director. So when
Hmm.
I'm feeding these intense video files into a phone, like I'm editing 4K 120, most
Hmm.
of my clips now are shot at an insanely high quality video. For a phone, obviously.
Hmm.
Um, Power Director actually struggles more with handling timelines with 4K 120 clips, where LumaFusion still gets twitchy. It's been a bit more stable and a bit more consistent there.
Hmm.
If you're not doing that kind of multi-layer, multi-track, or layered editing, I'd highly recommend just like trimming head and tail in something like Google Photos. Occasionally, you fire up something like CapCut if you just need to slam a couple clips together. There are ways to do this for free that are a
Hmm.
lot less processor intensive. It's when you're really trying to make a fully fleshed out video on the go that
Do
need something
yeah.
higher level.
Do CapCut and TikTok work without Wi-Fi for video editing? Internet?
That's a very good question. I don't know. Well, so CapCut, I believe, is that's I don't remember. I don't remember who develops CapCut. I wanted to say it was sort of uh, an offshoot of the company that also uh, develops
ByteDance.
TikTok.
Oh yeah, TikTok band company.
So I believe CapCut can work without a data connection. I'm not
Mhm.
sure what kind of functionality you have in TikTok off of a data connection because the main purpose of TikTok is being able to consume and upload
Mhm.
video footage. So,
Yeah. Speaking of TikTok, I actually uploaded a video on YouTube saying called "I Hate TikTok," so you can guys can go
oh,
check that
God
out on the
bless.
website and on the channel.
I mean,
On
I've struggled with that because I don't like social media services that turn like actual user engagement into just totally disposable fodder. And I like trying to teach people like, hey, you can just kind of pull out a phone, take a photo, and send it up to some kind of social media, or you can try to create something for your family, like my grandfather did with 8mm film cameras. Like, I like making things, and I
Mhm.
like those things to stick around. And Instagram into now TikTok, it just seems to be this compression of feed us content, feed us content, feed us content, and your content is totally disposable. It has no long tail. People don't search through archives of content like we used to with blogs and then later with YouTube. It's a trend that I really don't like, and
Mm-hmm.
I hope we find some balancing. I need some cotton candy and I need some popcorn content, and then I need some stuff that's going to stick around and it's going to be a little bit more nourishing and it's going to be a little bit more engaging. That's the, I don't know, it's the psychological hook
Mm-hmm.
of TikTok just feels really aggressive right now.
So speaking of long form content, you have okay. Speaking of
Oh, I'm
long
just
form
getting started.
content, you have about 150,000 subscribers on your channel, and
Hmm.
your videos are about longer than 10 minutes. Some of them for some of the in-depth reviews. And you
Yeah.
also have a Patreon. What would you do if you had to start your channel over again from zero?
Put way less effort into YouTube.
Really?
Yeah, my big problem with social media is the same thing that I've been saying with competition. I feel if you want to only be successful at YouTube, then you have to fulfill every single change that happens at YouTube. When I started, tech reviews were just top-down camera and disembodied hands handling a gadget. And
Mm-hmm.
that was great. That was fine. I mean, you can still see remnants of that today. Flossie Carter hasn't changed his production style significantly since he joined YouTube, and his audience is here for it because he's basically podcasting his experiences while hand-holding the gadget.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually kind of trying to get back to some of that just because the video workload is getting unsustainably more difficult trying to shoot nicer and nicer video for poorer and poorer returns. And every single time YouTube alters the algorithm to kind of boost one other fad. For a while it was Google Plus integration, then it was community tabs and posting in a community tab like it was on Facebook. And now it's shorts. Shorts are going to get monetized, and look at how much the algorithm is promoting shorts. Well, I don't make shorts. So if I had only been deeply entrenched at YouTube, I have to follow YouTube's trends or my channel is significantly devalued in the eyes of the algorithm. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's bad for creators' mental health. I think that's bad for burnout. I think that's bad for our audiences. It's harder to keep track of the people that you want to watch content from. The only thing it serves is YouTube's time on site. So
Mm-hmm.
instead, I've been trying to diversify personally. I stream a podcast on Twitch. I've been trying to write more just on my old blog. I've been trying to kind of just build that as a more consistent place where I can put out some thoughts that don't need to be videos. Um, Running an audio podcast and trying to engage more on other social media sites like Reddit and Mastodon. um, I feel like you go to the places where you want to have that kind of conversation and you want to have some relationship with potential audience in every place. And that way, if YouTube significantly changes up their business practices, you're not stuck. YouTube is a gatekeeper between you and your audience. And if they change what they want to feed your audience, you don't have any say in that. You don't have any access to that. But if I embed a YouTube video on my blog and I can drive a whole bunch of people to my blog, I get traffic and YouTube gets traffic, and YouTube can't really ignore that. They can't
Mm-hmm.
control how I bring people to my blog. They can't get in between me and my audience. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say diversification is always better. Putting time and effort into one so that you can kind of build up is great, but if you only stick with that and you don't have any other place to share, to tell stories, to create content, you are completely at the whim of that platform.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, don't spread yourself too thin, but don't be so entrenched and rooted that you can't make an adjustment or you can't, walk away from a platform that starts doing something you disagree with.
Mm-hmm. Interesting that you called YouTube a social media platform. You might have to have a debate about that in the comments of my article.
Well,
Um,
it's a weird amorphous blob because it's a bunch of pieces that have all been stapled together. So it started out as just purely video distribution and search,
mhm,
but Google tried to tie personal accounts to more public profiles, and
mhm,
there's the community tab and shorts are now functioning like TikTok. And I think it's pretty clear Google wants a bifurcation. They want big media tentpole traditional television content on their
mhm,
platform, and they want the most easily digestible, disposable, short form, user generated content. They just don't seem to want anything in the middle right now. And that's unfortunately where I got my start, was making that middle content that never spiked in popularity right away, but had a good long tail that people could engage with later on.
Hmm. Um, when you record your videos, you seem to like using Rode mics. What do you use to film, and what else make your videos?
I have a background in voiceover production. I used to be a director and a casting director, and I used to run like a ridiculous mic locker. My mic locker is still probably worth more than my car. But over time, and especially on YouTube, I've been valuing mobility and ease of use over trying to get the exact perfect representation of my recorded voice. I mean, even down to the point where I'm not even messing with license or music on my videos anymore,
Hmm.
just because of music licensing issues. Now I just go dry. It's just my voice.
Hmm.
And so right now I'm doing kind of the same thing I do for my video setups. I'm throwing on some Bluetooth earbuds, and I have a little Rode mic on right now,
Hmm.
but that's because I don't like sitting perfectly still in front of this microphone to record stuff. I like being able to move around and talk with my hands. Occasionally I'll still bring out, I've got just an old, I mean, I want to say it's almost a 30-year-old SM57. I use that for some of my narration work, but that's rarely on my YouTube channel. My all-time favorite mic I don't really use here because it's really studio grade, is the Akg C414. I have a Seni 416, but shotguns, I don't love the tone. They can be very directional, but I think they're kind of tone deaf. And I have a
Hmm.
timbre in the mid range of my voice that I think is distinctive for me, that gets squished on the 416. I have some Rhodes. I have some classic Blue microphones, not just their USB gear, and then just like a bunch of USB stuff that I can always
Hmm.
turn to and plug in. But more often than not, what really gets the job done is just how fast it is to snap a little clip-on mic from Rode, go wireless, and now if I need to pull something off a shelf and turn around and like, hey, look, this is my daughter's artwork. You didn't lose me for a second because I'm not tethered to one
Hmm.
spot on my desk. And that's more valuable to me than having like my perfect broadcast SM50, my SM7B, right up my nose. Yeah, I really like what Rode has done with the wireless setups. It's helped a lot in speeding up some of this setup.
What cameras do you use to film as well?
Mostly phone cameras.
Oh.
Right now, I've relegated a ridiculously nice Panasonic. This is the Panasonic G9 that I'm actually doing this on.
Hmm.
It's got a great prime on it, and I have another Panasonic that I use just sort of like for B-roll.
Hmm.
But increasingly, again, our phone cameras have gotten so good that without any kind of portrait mode or blur mode in software,
Hmm.
I can get really close to the look of one of these Panasonics on a reasonably fast lens. Especially once we start talking like a Xiaomi 12S Ultra,
Hmm.
I have comparable field of view and depth of focus to $1,000 Panasonic lens.
Nice.
So it's very easy for me to kind of turn around where I would normally in the past have had to set up a tripod and really angle my lights and really kind of set this stuff up. Now I can flip, a phone around. Whoops, not that phone. Where's my,
Oh.
oh, my Xiaomi's over here. I can flip a phone around and very quickly kind of line up a very similar looking shot. And so my A camera, where I'm just talking to camera,
Hmm.
that's almost exclusively this Panasonic, just because it's bolted into an arm on a stand in front of me. But I now say about 70% is either a Vivo or a Xiaomi, and then another 30% is another mirrorless camera like a Panasonic G9.
Nice. Just a heads up, I still have a few more questions, so I might have to send another link because the Zoom free plan's only 45 minutes.
Well,
Um,
in about 4 minutes, I gotta go. So I
okay, so I'll
gotta
just
I gotta
speed
bounce.
run through
So
the
a
questions.
speed run, and I'll
Okay.
and I'll stop rambling. I will answer as efficiently as possible. Go.
What was your favorite device testing that you got to test ever?
Test ever?
Hmm.
Um. Oh man. that one just stumped me. There have been so many devices that I've loved. I mean, genuinely loved, from my first Sony cinema display to getting to go early on Oculus for VR. Um, I don't have an answer for that. I
Oh,
really
okay.
don't.
Do you
That
have
is totally the Sophie's choice that would kill me there. I love too much tech.
do you have one that you just dislike the most, or the worst one?
Um, Again, my feelings on that, once you've reviewed
Mm-hmm.
so much stuff, it's kind of like watching a bad movie. There are so many terrible, terrible, terrible movies out there, and yet when you've really come to love cinema, you sort of understand how Herculean an effort it is to make a movie. And so you
Mm-hmm.
end up just kind of respecting, like, hey, they finished a movie. That movie was hot garbage. But you know what? I have not made a feature film, and I know how hard it would be, so good job. I've played with some really crummy accessories and some very disappointing phones, and yet at the end of the day, it's like, hey, it's still a functional gadget and it
Mm-hmm.
kind of does what they claimed it could do. So I don't I don't know that I really want to yuck someone else's yum. Like, especially if someone else liked that phone, it's not on me to say, well, that was garbage. Why didn't they just make a gooder phone? I
Mm-hmm.
don't have a good answer for that one either. Sorry.
Okay. What tech YouTubers, and tech bloggers do you appreciate and respect?
Uh, Increasingly, I mean, like, again, I've been playing at this for so long. I've got an army of friends that I
Mm-hmm.
genuinely adore their content. Gary Explains, Tech Potato, TK Bay, Nick Gray is doing beautiful lifestyle stuff over at Fandroid. Josh Vergara is one of the more thoughtful members in our community. He's just a really contemplative and kind of philosophical guy, and I like his vibe. I
Mm-hmm.
really enjoy the crew, like the whole crew over with Easy Computer Solutions, Gadget Goddess, Holla at Your Boy, Barry Johnson, Tech King Mike. They're just so much fun. I mean, I genuinely lurk all of their live streams just because they're so much fun. Ike
Nice.
Explains. That was the other one. So, whew, not Ike Explains. Ike Talks Tech.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I might be misquoting his channel. But I mean, like, it's really difficult. C Dubs has been putting out good work. Dan Grounded Tech has been putting out good work. Sam, I can't remember the name of their podcast now. That's gonna kill me. I've been good friends with Lenny for a really long time over at Purposely Pixel. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
just to have been in this game as long as I have, where I genuinely started disassembling technology products in my teens before most people had internet
Mm-hmm.
in their homes. Is just genuinely have had phenomenal experiences with these guys and
Mm-hmm.
gals and other tech aficionados. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot. I'm leaving out so many.
Mm-hmm.
But I think these are all people that have been doing incredible work in broadening this kind of tech landscape and conversation.
How do you feel about the new YouTube layout where you can't search by oldest videos and the lack of a dislike counting?
You know, um, whenever you dislike something that a platform's doing, it's okay to look at diversify.
Yeah.
Hey, welcome back.
Sorry about that. The
No
internet.
worries.
All
So I can give you a couple extra minutes here. So let's jump in.
right, all right.
Let's power through.
Okay. Um. Oh yes, yes. You seem to like gaming and audio equipment. Why is that?
I'm an audio snob who grew up playing computer
Uh.
games. I am my first game. I like the first time I remember playing a game. I think I was 6 years old, and we had an 8088 XT that ran DOS. It was like a little ninja jump game, and then there were snipes, and then we got into the Sierra adventure games like King's Quest and Space Quest. And so my parents were old school arcade junkies, and
Mm,
they loved going to play pinball and play old school coin-op video games, and I just kind of was along for the ride. And when you grow up like that, gaming is just a part of your of a part of your life. Like, I can't put down that as a form of entertainment.
nice. And for the last question, I saw a video that you did about homeschooling, and that's nice because I was
Yeah.
homeschooled for a little bit. What inspired you to
Oh,
make
great.
that video?
So my video wasn't specifically about homeschooling.
Mm-hmm.
It was at the beginning of the pandemic where I felt there were some tools that a number of parents could easily access that would help with the challenges we had with lockdowns. And I still feel like these are tools that would help a variety of people out there, both sort of schooled at in more school building type schools and people that are homeschooling.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the most difficult things about the way that we frame tech discussions today is getting good information to the people that are really end users. I feel a lot of our phone and computer and tablet reviews are really only reviews for people who are entertained by technology.
Mm-hmm.
They're not really built and they're not very informative for people that aren't entertained by the tech, but want to do things with the tech. And so we were going into lockdowns, and my daughter had been pulled out of her preschool. We were trying to figure out these challenges in finding her educational opportunities and finding her ways to kind of communicate with peers because she was really, really little. So
Mm-hmm.
having like webcam play dates was this experiment that we were trying. And there were all of these resources that I didn't feel were getting the attention that they deserved. And I still feel that way today. There are a number of challenges out there. Here in California, our COVID numbers are climbing again, so we're probably going to be looking at mask mandates, maybe through some part of the winter. There are these ways that we can still engage, interact, tell stories, share content, and improve educational opportunities. And we always do this to consumers where we explain that, and then we say, and you've got to buy something. Right? You've got to, here's an expensive laptop and that'll make your school better. And instead, like I was saying before with Samsung and Dex, like, do you need another computer in your home? You
Mm-hmm.
might already have it. So start there first before you start throwing money around. Now,
Mm-hmm.
when I have these kinds of conversations on a tech focused YouTube channel, I get a bunch of nerds that jump into my comments to say, like, oh, but I can't do this one program, or it didn't work for me because I didn't have this cable. And
Mm-hmm.
I, fine, but the alternative is go buy a whole other computer. And that's not accessible for a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people out there right now. Let's look at the economy. So that's what I'm trying to break through. I'm trying to break past the fog of tech enthusiasts that aren't very enthusiastic about tech. I don't know why this is such a popular position to be in on YouTube comments right now, is going to something that's a little different or a little unfamiliar from what you use and
Mm-hmm.
then complaining about how it wasn't perfectly built for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you've experienced some of that in managing your own channel. The only way I can kind of conceptualize that is to kind of end run around them. I'm openly hostile on my channel to people who
Mm-hmm.
act like that, and then hopefully some other part of the conversation can make it through where there's someone out in rural Nebraska who cannot afford a laptop, but they have a
Mm-hmm.
Galaxy S10 and
Mm-hmm.
they have an old beat up Dell monitor, and that's plenty of computer for them. But they don't know that they can do that. They
Mm-hmm.
still think they need to go to a Best Buy and drive an hour into town and buy a terrible computer because that's all they can afford, when their phone would genuinely be a more powerful system than buying a cheap, student grade
Mm-hmm.
laptop.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to reach those people except to just kind of keep trying to put that kind of information out there, and hopefully it gets shared by other family members and friends and it spreads naturally, because it's not popular on YouTube. That is not content that the YouTube
Mm-hmm.
algorithm is interested in promoting.
Well, thanks for coming on to the channel, and hopefully we'll have the video out
Yeah.
by tomorrow or today.
Oh, well, I
Um,
mean, thank you for having me again. These conversations are always fun, and I've been kind of peeking in on the work that you've been doing, and it's exciting to see sort of a fresher perspective from someone, because I'm old and set in my ways.
mhm.
So again, joining this conversation in earnest and trying to put out good information on your experiences is always helpful. I mean, even to someone like me, it's always helpful to see what's coming up and how people react to things differently than I do. So I'm wishing you all of that and more in continued success as you kind of keep telling these stories.
Thank you. Bye.
Welcome.
Tech talk
Take
to you
care.
later.